In the autumn of 1922, beneath a crabapple tree in rural New Jersey, two bodies were discovered arranged with ceremonial precision. The victims had been lovers, their forbidden affair exposed in the most brutal manner imaginable. Yet the physical evidence at the scene suggested something far more sinister than a crime of passion. What investigators found would challenge every assumption about human nature and the darkness that lurks within seemingly ordinary communities. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed for more eerie discoveries. It was September 16, 1922, just after dawn broke over the farmlands of Somerset County, New Jersey. A young couple walking along DeRussey's Lane, a secluded dirt road that wound through the rural landscape outside New Brunswick, made a discovery that would haunt them for the remainder of their lives. Pearl Bomber and Raymond Schneider had been strolling through the quiet countryside when they noticed something unnatural beneath an old crab apple tree. Two bodies lay side by side, positioned with an almost ritualistic care that immediately struck both witnesses as profoundly wrong. The woman wore a blue dress, her gray hair carefully arranged around her shoulders. The man, dressed in a dark suit, lay with his arm positioned across her body in an embrace that death had made eternal. The victims were quickly identified as Eleanor Mills, a 34-year-old choir singer, and Deadwood Hall, a 41-year-old episcopal. Both had been residents of New Brunswick, where Hall served as minister at St. John the Evangelist Church and Mills sang in his choir. What made their deaths particularly scandalous was the revelation that the married minister and the wife of the church janitor had been conducting a passionate affair. The positioning of the bodies suggested a deliberate arrangement. Someone had taken considerable care to place them in their final pose, with Mills' head resting against Hall's shoulder. Her calling card had been propped against her foot, while scattered around both bodies were love letters they had exchanged, torn into pieces, yet arranged so the most intimate passages remained clearly visible. The letters revealed the depth of their forbidden relationship. Mills had written to Hall about her burning desire to feel his arms around her, while Hall had promised to leave his wife for her. The correspondence painted a picture of two people consumed by a love that their society deemed unacceptable, yet the manner of their deaths suggested something far more complex than simple retribution. Dr. Timothy Mullen, the examining physician, noted that both victims had been shot once in the head with a .32 caliber revolver. Hall's wound was clean and precise, but Mills had suffered additional mutilation. Her throat had been slashed 3 times, and her tongue had been completely severed. The brutality inflicted upon the choir singer seemed to carry a symbolic message about the words she had spoken or sung. The investigation revealed disturbing details about the hours leading up to the murders. On the evening of September 14th, Hall had told his wife he was going to visit a sick parishioner. Mills had informed her husband she was taking a walk to clear her head. Neither had been seen alive again until their bodies were discovered 2 days later. What puzzled investigators was the condition of the crime scene. Despite the bodies having lain outdoors for at least 36 hours, there was no evidence of animal disturbance or significant decomposition. The love letters, though torn, showed no signs of weather damage. Even more peculiar, the ground around the crabapple tree appeared to have been swept clean, as if someone had methodically removed all trace evidence. Local residents reported strange occurrences in the days before the murders. Several witnesses claimed to have seen a black automobile driving slowly through the area late at night, its occupants watching the houses along DeRussey's Lane. Others described hearing what sounded like a woman screaming in the distance, followed by an unnatural silence that seemed to blanket the entire countryside. The investigation quickly focused on Frances Hall, the minister's wife, and her 2 brothers, Willie and Henry Stevens. Frances Hall was a woman of considerable social standing and wealth whose family had deep roots in New Brunswick society. The Stevens brothers were known for their eccentric behavior and fierce loyalty to their sister. Willie, in particular, was regarded as mentally unstable and prone to violent outbursts. On the night of the murders, all three family members claimed to have been at home together, but their alibis contained troubling inconsistencies. Frances Hall insisted she had spent the evening reading in her study, yet servants reported seeing her leave the house around the time Hall was supposed to be visiting his sick parishioner. Willie Stevens claimed to have been tending to his stamp collection, but neighbors reported seeing him walking along DeRussey's Lane just hours before the bodies were discovered. The most damning evidence came from Jane Gibson, a local pig farmer who lived near the murder scene. Gibson claimed to have witnessed the crime while investigating suspicious noises on her property. According to her testimony, she had seen 4 figures gathered beneath the crabapple tree, including a woman who appeared to be arguing with the victims before gunshots rang out. Gibson's description of the woman matched Frances Hall's appearance and clothing, but her account contained elements that defied logic. She insisted that after the shooting, the murderers had performed some kind of ritual around the bodies, moving in a circular pattern, while speaking in voices that seemed to echo unnaturally in the night air. Most disturbing was her claim that the woman had knelt beside Mill's body and appeared to be cutting something from the choir singer's throat with methodical precision. The physical evidence at the scene supported some aspects of Gibson's testimony while contradicting others. Footprints found near the crabapple tree indicated that at least 4 people had been present during the murders, and the arrangement of the bodies suggested a deliberate ceremony rather than spontaneous violence. However, the lack of blood evidence made it impossible to determine whether the victims had been killed at that location or murdered elsewhere and transported to the scene. As the investigation progressed, more disturbing details emerged about the relationship between the victims and the Hall family. Church records revealed that Eleanor Mills had been receiving regular payments from Frances Hall, supposedly for her choir duties, but the amounts were far larger than what other singers received. Several parishioners reported that Mills had been behaving strangely in the weeks before her death, arriving early to church and staying late, as if she were searching for something in the building. The most chilling discovery came when investigators examined the love letters more closely. Hidden among the torn fragments were passages that had been written in a different hand, messages that seemed to be responses to the lovers' correspondence. The unknown writer had detailed knowledge of their affair and had been systematically documenting their meetings and conversations. The tone of these hidden messages grew increasingly threatening, culminating in a final note that promised both lovers would pay for their sins against God and family. Handwriting experts were unable to definitively identify the author of the threatening messages, but the paper and ink matched materials found in the Hall family home. More disturbing was the discovery that some of the letters had been deliberately arranged at the crime scene to highlight the most damaging passages, as if someone wanted to ensure the full extent of the affair would be revealed to investigators. The case took an even darker turn when several witnesses reported seeing strange lights moving through the area around DeRussey's Lane in the nights following the murders. Local residents described glowing orbs that seemed to hover near the crabapple tree, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm that made observers feel profoundly uneasy. These sightings always occurred during the darkest hours before dawn, and anyone who approached the lights reported experiencing sudden fits of nausea and disorientation. Despite the mounting evidence and public outcry, the initial investigation failed to produce any arrests. The case remained unsolved for 4 years until a former maid in the Hall household came forward with new testimony. Anna Hogue claimed that on the night of the murders, she had overheard Frances Hall and her brothers discussing their plans to confront the lovers. According to Hogue, the family had discovered the location of a planned rendezvous and intended to put an end to the affair permanently. In 1926, Frances Hall and her brothers were finally arrested and brought to trial. The proceedings revealed the full extent of the family's knowledge about the affair and their systematic efforts to gather evidence against the lovers. Willie Stevens, despite his apparent mental instability, had been conducting sophisticated surveillance of both victims, documenting their movements and meetings with obsessive detail. The trial testimony painted a picture of a family consumed by rage and humiliation, determined to protect their reputation at any cost. Yet, certain aspects of the case remained unexplained. The precision of the crime scene arrangement, the symbolic nature of Mill's mutilation, and the strange atmospheric disturbances reported by witnesses suggested elements that transcended ordinary human motivations. The jury ultimately acquitted all three defendants, finding the evidence insufficient to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt. However, the verdict did nothing to resolve the deeper mystery surrounding the case. The true identity of the person who had been writing threatening messages to the lovers was never established, and the source of the detailed surveillance information remained unknown. In the years following the trial, several investigators attempted to reopen the case, but their efforts were consistently frustrated by missing evidence and uncooperative witnesses. The love letters that had been central to the original investigation disappeared from police custody, and several key witnesses died under circumstances that raised additional questions about the case. The final mystery emerged decades later when construction workers clearing land near the original crime scene made an unexpected discovery. Buried beneath the roots of the old crabapple tree, they found a metal box containing dozens of photographs that appeared to document the victims' secret meetings. The images had been taken from concealed positions and showed an intimate knowledge of the lovers' routines and behavior patterns. Most disturbing were the final photographs in the collection, which showed both victims on the night of their deaths. The images captured their final moments with such clarity and detail that investigators realized the photographer had been present during the murders. Yet the angles and positioning of the shots suggested they had been taken from impossible vantage points, as if the photographer had been suspended in the air above the crime scene. The photographs were submitted for analysis, but experts found no evidence of tampering or manipulation. The images appeared to be authentic documentation of events that no human observer could have witnessed from those perspectives. The film's stock and development techniques were consistent with 1922 technology, yet the clarity and detail exceeded what should have been possible with equipment available at that time. The Hall Mills case officially remains unsolved, with the photographs sealed in an evidence vault that has been classified beyond public access. The last investigator assigned to the case reported that the images contained details that fundamentally challenged the accepted understanding of the murders, but his final report was never released to the public. What do you think could explain those impossible photographs found beneath the crab apple tree, captured from angles no human photographer could have achieved? Subscribe to uncover more cases where the evidence defies every rational explanation.